She had come to Africa with maps and books, a woman of science who tried to explain everything with logic. But when she was betrayed by the one person she trusted and left for dead, neither maps nor books could save her. Fate threw her into the hands of a mysterious hunter who hated everything she represented. The hunter planned to leave her to her fate, but he didn't know that this delicate woman carried her own secret to survival and would become the only map his heart would ever need. In the sun-scorched lands of Tanzania in 1902, the young botanist Isabella Finch was chasing her father's obsession, the legendary orchid of life. Her father, Professor Alistair Finch, believed this rare flower could cure any disease, and had dedicated years to piecing together ancient maps that showed its location. Isabella, unlike her father, was skeptical of this legend, but didn't want to miss the opportunity to catalog Africa's unique flora. With them was Larsen, a charismatic but sinister guide who claimed to know the region like the back of his hand. Larsen had won the professor's trust, but in his eyes gleamed the greed of a gold prospector. Tragedy struck as the team was crossing a dangerous mountain pass. A sudden rock slide separated the group. When Isabella regained consciousness after a brief moment of blackout, she found herself alone and helpless, her leg pinned under a rock. There was no sign of her father or Larsen. "Father! Larsen!" she cried, but her voice was lost in the roar of the valley. When she managed to free her leg from under the rock, she faced a terrible truth. Larsen had taken advantage of the chaos to steal her father's bag, which contained the priceless map to the Orchid of Life and all their supplies. He had left her, injured, to die in the middle of the wilderness. Isabella's world of logic collapsed in that moment. Her maps, her scientific knowledge, everything was gone. She was no longer a professor's daughter, but a wounded prey in the middle of a savanna, unsure if she would see the next sunrise. Driven by her survival instinct, she began to stumble, trying to find north, but there was something she didn't know. A man like Larsen doesn't leave a witness behind. And not far away, another pair of eyes was silently watching her clumsy steps. Kaylin was reading the tracks in the dirt, but these were not the tracks of an antelope or a lion. These were the tracks of a frightened, injured human who did not belong to these lands. Kaylin was the last guardian of his people, a mysterious hunter who lived alone to protect his lands from the greed of outsiders. Years ago, the men with shiny tools, searching for rare precious stones, had destroyed the valley where his family lived. Since that day, he had carried an icy hatred in his heart for everything that came from civilization. He found Isabella by a riverbank, about to faint from thirst. Her expensive but tattered safari clothes and her white skin screamed that she came from the world he despised. Kalin's first instinct was to turn his back and leave her to her fate. These lands did not forgive the weak, and this woman was obviously weak. But then he saw the bright red fruit she was clutching tightly in her hand, even in her pain. It was a fruit they called the Weeping Spirit, beautiful but deadly poisonous. The woman was about to die from her own ignorance. Muttering a curse against the spirits of his ancestors, Kaylin approached the woman and forcefully knocked the poisonous fruit from her hand. He gave her a few sips of water from his own flask. When Isabella came to, she was terrified of the imposing man with tribal markings on his face standing before her. "You have to help me," she whispered. "They stole my map." Kaylin did not respond to her words. He just stood up, ready to leave. In a panic, Isabella said, "Wait. I know I may not seem like I know these lands, but I'm a scientist. I know plants. I can help you." Kaylin stopped, slowly turned to her, and picked up a fruit similar to the one he had just knocked from her hand. He crushed it without a word. The poisonous juice dripped from his fingers. The message was clear. "Your knowledge is nothing here." Then he started walking without another word. Isabella had two choices: either follow this frightening man or die here alone. Following Kaylin was the toughest test of Isabella's life. The hunter neither slowed down nor looked back. It was as if he was completely ignoring her existence. Isabella made a superhuman effort to keep up with him on her injured leg, frequently falling and getting back up. The strange roots and insects Kaylin ate nauseated her, but hunger forced her to eat anything. Every day, the arrogance and knowledge she carried from civilization crumbled away piece by piece. Here, the rules of survival were not written in books, but by this silent man. However, an incident occurred that changed this one-sided relationship. As Kalen was descending a steep slope, his foot slipped, and he struck his arm against a sharp rock. The wound was deep and bloody. Kalen tried to stop the bleeding by pressing some leaves mixed with dirt onto the wound. It was the only method he knew. But Isabella, from the color of the blood and the rapid swelling around the wound, understood that the risk of infection was very high. When she noticed Kalen's fever rising and him starting to become delirious, she realized the roles had been reversed. Now, she had to be the protector. Isabella decided to use her botanical knowledge as a last resort. After waiting for hours by Kalen's feverish body, she finally recognized a plant she had read about in her father's books, the silver leaf vine, with its broad silvery leaves and strong antiseptic properties. She crushed the leaves to make a poultice and carefully applied it to Kalen's wound. For 2 days, she did not leave the hunter's side, feeding him water and refreshing the poultice. On the dawn of the 3rd day, Kalen opened his eyes. His fever had broken, and his wound was clean. The usual hatred was gone from his eyes. Instead, there was an expression she had never seen before, surprise and a hint of respect. Just then, Kalen's sharp ears caught a sound. A branch had snapped in the bushes in the distance. It was not an animal sound. Kalen immediately jumped to his feet and examined the tracks in the dirt. These were the boot prints of a European. Larson had found them. Now, Isabella was not just a burden, but also the reason for the danger that was hunting them. Larson's tracks were like the herald of an approaching storm. The expression on Kalen's face had changed from respect to something more, a sense of urgent danger. This man, Kalen said, his voice harsh, would not come back just for a map. He is a stone eater, which in my language means soul thief. Isabella knew that Larson was after not just the map but the legendary orchid, but Kalen's reaction pointed to a deeper secret. Kalen checked Isabella's injured leg and, for the first time, gave her a command. We must walk faster. The man who had tried to leave her to her fate was gone, replaced by a guardian who understood he had to protect her. The pair began to move through more dangerous and direct routes. During this journey, their roles completely reversed. Kalen taught Isabella not only how to survive, but also how to listen to the language of nature. Isabella, in turn, explained to Kalen in scientific terms that plants were not just food or poison, but also affected the chemistry of the soil, the flow of water, and even the change in the air. One evening, as they took shelter in a cave, Kalen showed her an old tattoo on his arm in the firelight. It was a stylized image of the orchid of life. "My people," he began, "have been the guardians of this flower for centuries. It doesn't just heal diseases, it is the heart of the land. If it falls into the wrong hands, this land will die." In that moment, Isabella understood just how dangerous her father's obsession and Larson's greed were. This was not just a matter of finding a rare plant, it was about the fate of an entire ecosystem and the sacred heritage of a people. Larson, Isabella said, wants the orchid not just to sell it, but to control it. My father's notes contained theories that the orchid's essence, when combined with the right chemicals, could instantly grow or destroy plants. Kalen's eyes blazed with fury. Now he understood why Larson was a soul thief. He wasn't just a treasure hunter, but a man in pursuit of a potential weapon of destruction. They were no longer running. Kalen was preparing to fight to protect his home, his sacred heritage, and Isabella had unwittingly become his most important ally in this war. Kalen decided to take Isabella to his own sanctuary, a hidden valley in the heart of the Weeping Mountains. This valley, mentioned only in legends, was the homeland of the Orchid of Life, a place of waterfalls and lush greenery. However, the path there was filled with traps and natural obstacles. During their journey, the bond between them transformed from a forced alliance into a deep partnership. One night, while crossing a narrow pass, Isabella's injured leg gave out. "I can't go on," she whispered helplessly. "Leave me here. Without a word, Kalen lifted her onto his back and carried her silently for hours over the rocky terrain. With her head resting on the hunter's strong back, for the first time in her life, Isabella felt completely safe. This man, where all the rules of civilization ended, represented humanity in its purest form. As they approached the entrance to the valley, Kalen stopped and told Isabella how his family had died. Other stone-eaters, like Larson, had come to find the precious minerals that protected the valley, spread a plague, and killed many people, including Kalen's family. Since that day, Kalen had sworn to protect this valley alone. This confession touched something in Isabella's heart. She saw how her father's scientific curiosity could serve the greed of men like Larson. "Your father may be a good man," Kalen said, "but his knowledge is a weapon in the hands of wicked men." When they entered the valley, the view was breathtaking. Hundreds of orchids of life glowed with a phosphorescent blue in the moonlight, casting a magical aura around them. But this beauty was overshadowed by a trap. Kalen noticed that one of the primitive alarms he had set at the valley's entrance had been triggered. Larson had followed them and was much closer than they thought. Kalen hid Isabella among the orchids. "Whatever happens, don't come out of here," he whispered. "This is my fight." But Isabella had another plan. She was not a warrior, but she was a scientist, and this valley would be her laboratory. She remembered her father's notes, the chemical properties of the plants. She didn't have to fight. She could turn this valley into a cage for their unwelcome guest. When Larson entered the valley, he was sure of his victory. The map had led him here, and now all he had to do was eliminate the hunter and collect the orchids. But the valley was eerily silent. As he waited for Kalen, he noticed that the plants around him were starting to emit a strange scent. At first, he paid it no mind, but within minutes, he began to feel dizzy, his vision blurring. Taking advantage of Kalen creating a diversion, Isabella had mixed the pollens of specific plants in the valley. These pollens were harmless on their own, but when combined, they created a powerful hallucinogenic effect. Larson began to see ghosts, to hear voices that weren't there. As he fired his gun in a panic, Kalen emerged like a shadow and easily subdued him. The gunshots had disturbed the peace of the valley. Just as Kalen was about to deliver the final blow to Larson, Isabella appeared. "Stop!" she shouted. "If you kill him, you'll be no different from him." The justice of civilization must judge him. Though filled with hatred, Kalen saw the wisdom in Isabella's eyes and backed down. They tied Larson up and set out to deliver him to the nearest colonial outpost. Years later, Isabella never left Africa. She used her father's inheritance to help the local people. Together with Kalen, they established a sustainable research center in the valley, protecting the secret of the orchid of life. Their love was a perfect union of two opposing worlds, science and nature, logic and spirit. One evening, as they sat by the waterfall in the valley, Kalen gave Isabella a small orchid figure he had made from clay. "You," he said, "are the rarest flower in this valley." Isabella smiled and replied, "And you are my most mysterious and valuable discovery." They had become each other's maps, guiding their lost souls home to each other. And that was a discovery greater than any book could ever write.